Let's rank card art illustrations from Vivid Voltage. One of my favorite things about the Pokemon trading card game and collecting cards is really just looking at all the different art styles and ways that these different artists really imagine the Pokemon on the cards. And so I figured, why not do a ranking of the top 10 Pokemon card art illustrations from Vivid Voltage. The first thing I gotta say is no, this won't be me just choosing my favorite Pokemon. That has absolutely no influence in the way that I will be ranking the cards today. A lot of the Pokemon in this ranking list I don't even really like that much, which is kind of funny. But that's part of the magic with Pokemon trading card game. Because of certain gameplay mechanics, or sometimes they release really cool art for a certain Pokemon, it makes me actually care about that Pokemon more than I would have before. The first thing that comes to mind with this would have to be Malamar. I didn't really care for that Pokemon before. I didn't like its design. I thought it was trying too hard, and then Malamar dominated all the decks last year. And it was a really cool mechanic, and playing that deck a lot myself, I learned to appreciate Malamar as a Pokemon, and now I actually kind of like Malamar in the games and all the other various Pokemon outlets. Like I said, we're going to be judging these cards on the illustrations only. And if you're sitting there wondering, well, why do you care so much about the art, or what makes you qualified to even make this video? For my day job, I lead a graphic design team, and in college I majored in art. I just have a really big passion for art, and so it's impossible for me to look at these cards and not really form my thoughts about them. So for these cards to be in the top 10 ranking for me, we're going to be looking at things like composition, texture, colors, whether or not the imagery tells a story or sparks some kind of emotion. Throughout the video, I'm going to be putting up the names of the illustrators who created the art, mainly because Pokemon Trading Card Game likes to recycle their artists a lot. And so you'll start to see that artists tend to have certain stylistic approaches. Also, just because giving credit where credit is due is cool. Lastly, I will be excluding cards like full arts, Pokemon Vs, etc. Basically, if the card looks like this, then it qualifies. And that's mainly just because that's where we get really good artistry and variety in the card illustrations. And with all that being said, let's dive in with number 10. In the number 10 spot, we have Quagsire. First and foremost, this card is beautiful. It has such an amazing color palette. And the thing that's really working here is that Quagsire has cool tones about him. He's made up of blues and purples and whatnot, and the background is this beautiful sunset environment, and so therefore it's providing plenty of contrast from Quagsire to the background, making him stand out quite a bit. There's small details, like the sparkles in the sky sort of mimic the sparkles that's happening off the water, which is really nice. It kind of helps tie it all together. And the thing that I think I love most about this card is that Quagsire has such a funny expression on. This is the face of somebody who just peed in the pool. Let's be honest. The only thing I don't like about this card is that tiny bit amount of space from the top of his head touching the top of that metal part towards the top of his card illustration area. It just there's just a lot of tension there, and they should have either had his head go a little bit behind it or had a little bit more clearance in there, and then it would have been perfect. In the 9th spot, we have Clefable. This card is just insanely adorable. The color palette is very charming. We kind of have this opposite of what we had going on in the Quagsire card. So now we have warm tones on the Clefable and sort of muted, cool tones in the background. And the composition also flows very nicely. So we sort of have this starfall, and it's curving over and around, right? But then we come back around, our eyes do, and then there's the curve of Clefable's tail and the curve of Clefable's sort of hair at the top, and then all the flowers also are curved. There's just a lot of curves here, and that's making the whole piece feel very soft, and that's what's giving it really that cute feeling. The only gripe I have about this card is that the lighting just doesn't feel quite consistent. So it looks cool, but it just doesn't make sense. What I'm talking about is Clefable has sort of this underglow going right now, right? But we don't sort of see any light source coming from the ground plane that she's standing on, so it doesn't quite make sense whenever we have really the stars should be the light source from the top. So that's a little odd, but besides that, this is an amazing card. Coming in the number 8 spot is Loudred. This card is pretty impactful when you first look at it. You see all these sound boom lines coming from Loudred. And the way that the Pokemon is just like kind of like plumped in the center really gives you the sense that he's anchored there and that he's really blasting away. There's a lot of circular patterns happening on this card, which is fantastic. So obviously we have the circles in his ears that kind of act as, I guess, the amps. But then we also have the sort of circular pattern in his mouth. We see circles also in the pattern of the rock or the stump that he's sitting on. And so that sort of repeated pattern is really nice to see throughout a piece. The color scheme here is really, really great. We have these sort of muted jewel tones. They're very nice. But the only problem with some of these like lighter color palettes is that sometimes you don't have enough contrast in certain areas. So for example, if we were to look at the like toes of Loudred against the mountain backgrounds, or even like his teeth color against the yellow lips, there's not a lot of contrast there. So I think maybe the artist could have just added a little bit of just like very, very subtle drop shadowing or outer glow to just kind of like give a little distinction there, just a little bit, because you don't want to go too much with that. But this is a really aesthetically pleasing piece. All right, so in the number 7 spot, we have Galvanian Stuntfish. And you're probably thinking like, what the hell, Gamer Ricks? This one is really boring looking. You know, it's not maybe the most exciting Pokemon in the most exciting pose ever, but this card art is done really well. The line art, particularly, it is such an amazing quality. So it's pretty even throughout, right? But then if you look closely, there is some texture to that line, and that just adds a nice sort of feeling to it that helps to prevent the piece from becoming too clean feeling, given that the line work is so even throughout. I think the colors here are just fantastic too. You have muted browns and grays throughout the entire thing, but then obviously you have this pop of like lime green and the red on the mouth of the Stuntfish himself, and that brings your eyes to the center to where the Pokemon is. But even if we look outside of that, I just think the distinction between the variants of the slight like brown and gray tones is just really well done and really well chosen in the spots that they put it in. And then lastly, you know, the composition is great too. It's sort of like a pseudo isometric view, and they did a fantastic job at that. Rocco! In the number 6 spot, we have Beedrill. This card is quite amazing. It has such a good composition. The perspective is really nice. You really feel like the drill of the Beedrill is like coming straight at you. One particular detail that I really love about this card is the shape language used for Beedrill's legs mimic the shape language used in the blades of grass behind him. It just creates this really nice harmony, and I'm all about it. Another thing to note here is the shading. The artist used a certain shading technique throughout that feels pretty consistent, even though we have areas like the drills on the hands that sort of are metallic and look different than the body and the background, but it all still feels like it's in unison, which is fantastic. Lastly, I think the artist made a really good choice in sort of blurring the colors and the shading in the background as opposed to the foreground. It really lets Beedrill stand out. Go! In our number 5th spot, we have Bennett. For this card, the artist was so masterful in how they handled all these dark tones in this card. They weave black and gray so perfectly to where we get a very interesting background, but it's not like too muddy to where we can't tell what's going on either. I think that's extremely hard to do, and they did a fantastic job doing it. The perspective on this card is really stellar. We get this great sense that Bennett is defying gravity and kind of floating and descending onto us. And the whole sort of like fisheye sort of like lens background technique like enhances this even further. This card also features a great variety of textures, which is nice. You know, we have sort of like this, you can see sort of shading lines on Bennett, but then in the background we're getting like some grain and some light flares and some halo lighting, and it all comes together really, really nicely, even though these are very diverse ways of sort of shading and adding texture to a piece. No. Our 4th placeholder is a very fun card. Here we have Dusk Noir. Now this card just has like ultimate style. Like it looks like an old time like video game instruction booklet illustration of the big bad boss at the end. You know, it has that sort of quality about it. And I think that this artist did a fantastic job capturing that. You know, it even looks like the castle where he's keeping Princess Peach is right behind him. The only thing that I would change about this piece is sort of the ghosts that are kind of coming towards Dusk Noir. I would have Rather, it looked like they were more coming from all around Dusk Noir rather than just kind of like 3 on one side and then 1 in the corner. The upper left corner then tends to feel a little bit more empty because of that. So I think they could have done a little bit better job with that part. We've made it now to our top 3, and snagging the number 3rd spot is Zera Aura. Now this card is just powerful. I mean, look at that striking pose. It's so awesome. But when we look at like what's making this card work, take a look at like all the lightning sort of streaks that are happening behind, around, in front of Zera Aura, and then look at the shape language and body language of Zera Aura's actual like physical design. You know, it's all angular. We sort of see the lightning bolt in the tail too, in the ears, the way the claws are, the way the design is on the thighs. All of it just works together, and sort of encasing Zera Aura in these blue lightning streaks really emphasizes that in a great way. And this is another card where color's working really well here. We have the cool tone versus warm tone situation again, but what's really great about this is Zera Aura does have these accents of blue on its claws and the horn on its head, and that's just emphasized more with the blue streaks going all around it. Coming in second place is Electros. And this card has a lot of similarities to what made Zera Aura stand out so much. It's a very strong, striking pose. And you know, overall, there's a lot of like textures going throughout that are consistent. That feels really great. I ranked Electros above Zera Aura though, is for a few reasons. One is the composition here. So we have the curve of Electros's body, and it sort of works with the curve of the composition. Like we're at an angle, and the water's kind of swishing over, and the horizon's even kind of curved a little bit. And so that could just kind of like keeps your eye going around the piece, and it works really well. My favorite detail about this card, though, is the way the electricity is drawn on Electros. It's drawn in such a delicate, light way that it almost looks like water lines on Electros too, and Electros being a water and an electric Pokemon, it just works out super well and kind of has like a double sort of effect there. What a menacing card. We have finally arrived to the top of our countdown, and taking the number 1 spot is none other than Shedinja. This card has got it all. But first, let's talk about the composition. This is just so perfect. So essentially, we have a lot of sort of like curves going on in the background, right? But they all mimic the halo that is above Shedinja's head. And it's even sort of like you get the cutoff at the top, just like you get the cutoff on the halo. It's so great. The colors on this piece are just simply amazing. I mean, look how beautiful it is. When we think about the colors, we can also talk about like the theme of this piece. Like Shedinja is a Pokemon that's sort of born from sort of the shedded case of another Pokemon. And so there's like this idea of death. Shedinja has a halo, etc., right? And it sort of has this like stained glass window effect for this piece, which I think works out really, really well. And let's talk about that like random dead looking human in the background. Like, what is going on? There's definitely some kind of story in this card. It's very mysterious, and I'm here for it. This particular artist has a very unique style, and I think they make amazing, amazing cards, but this card is just... And there we have it. We're at the end of our countdown here. Did your favorite card make it on the list? If not, let me know which cards I might have missed down in the comments below. And if you like this type of video, definitely like and subscribe. I'm thinking about also doing series where I rank the top worst cards in a set. So if that's something you'd like to see, definitely let me know. Thanks for stopping by, and catch you next time.